So this is a tweet thread that reminds us all that the dust is global. It doesn't matter country of origin, culture, religion, or not religious, whatever, the dust is global. This is a trigger warning. There is DV in this tweet thread. She titles this, Nice Guys, Happy Family Pics, and DV. So this is kind of a long tweet thread. So she says, the first time my ex-husband hit me was after I had taken $200 out of our account to put a deposit on a washing machine. He apparently used to check the bank balance on his way home from work each night. No ATMs or online banking back then. I was 3 months pregnant, standing at the doorway between our tiny flat, a room above a garage, and our landlady's kitchen, chatting. She saw him before me, quickly said goodbye, and shut the door. He grabbed me by my long hair, spun me around, and started beating my abdomen with his fist. He was a builder, young, fit, and very strong. I fell to the floor, unable to speak, and rolled into a little ball to protect my belly, while he rained punches on my head, shoulders, and back, adding a few kicks. I whispered, what about the baby? He replied, I hope you miscarry, you B-word. When he stopped and drove off furiously in his car, I don't remember how long after that I got up. But when I did, I ran, barefoot and crying, 2 blocks to a friend's house. I was barely able to talk, let alone make sense of what just happened. She made me a cup of tea, and I sat stunned and silent. He turned up sometime later, no doubt guessing where I had gone, with 2 church elders from the religion I was raised in. They didn't ask me what happened. I was barely able to talk in sentences, but they did give me a long lecture about how important it was for Christian women to ask their husbands for permission before spending money. I had been brutally abused all of my childhood and blamed for it. I had no mechanism to query the take of these men, especially when it had been drummed into me that the elders held authority over me. No one told him that his brutality was wrong. That didn't even get mentioned, just my failure as a wife. The next few months saw the violence escalate. I was thrown downstairs, had my possessions smashed, and when I ran away, he would chase me down, punch me in the back of the head, and make me fall to the ground, and then drag me up onto my feet again by the hair and force me to go home. I didn't scream or yell. I whimpered and begged him to stop. I told my dad what was happening, just once. He asked me what I had done to provoke it. I didn't speak about it with him again for the more than 15 years that it continued. We had countless meetings with church elders. I was always counseled about things that I had to change. It was always my fault. We had 3 children, one of whom died as an infant. I also had 3 miscarriages. On the outside, we were a happy couple. We smiled at our church meetings, holding hands, cuddling, and we were always beautifully dressed. Unless you have been in the situation where you sleep with a monster, it's hard to describe the way that living with this fear freezes something deep inside, or how it is possible to suppress everything except the need to avoid making him angry, or how we build a facade of normality while living with the threat of being unalived. My kids went to school fearful that he was going to unalive or maim me while they were away because he would threaten me in front of them. They learned to call the police. One had a frightening, calm discussion with me about what would happen if he did unalive me, and yet they also smiled in public and looked happy, just as I had done when my father was violent, because terrorized people learn to make sure that the reputation of their abuser is protected at all times for their own sakes. They learn to be loved up when needed and compliant on demand. My ex was a nice guy. He helped people out. He did building projects for them or helped them shift house. I don't know what shift house means. He cuddled his kids in public, and me too. He was a hard worker and decent. When I left him, I can't count the number of people who said they had no idea we had any problems. Who said we were always so happy? That's the point. It is safer to pretend to keep oneself alive than to risk admitting it to ourselves, let alone to anyone else. Also, when someone has been brainwashed into thinking they are the cause of the abuse, it takes expert intervention to help them realize what is going on. I was lucky. I found my way to a refuge and got counseling. There were 3 moments that my life and those of our little girls was most at risk once I started to leave. One was the day I left, and he tracked me to the refuge, then rang to speak to me and told me he knew where it was and I shouldn't think I was safe. The second was when I moved back into the family home a year later and he moved out. He drove his vehicle in front of the small moving trunk I was driving and forced me to stop. My father was in the cab with me, which stopped my ex from attacking me. I drove to a friend's house and called the police. Dad went to see my ex on his own and came back with a greenish white face, terrified. He said he had never realized how threatening my ex was before then, and he had to run to get away. The third was when my ex picked up our girls for an access weekend, and I felt an incredible fear as they drove away. A year later, when we were agreeing to divorce, I told him I had been scared he was going to unalive himself and them. He told me calmly that he had been planning it, but chose not to. If he had unalived me or them or all of us, he would have been called a nice guy in the media. His friends would have said the same thing, and all the same BS would have been trotted out about mental health, loneliness, inarticulate males, and etc. And we would have been 3 more victims added to the carnage. Once, when he beat me up, he ripped the dress I was wearing from neck to hem. I threw it in the rubbish. A few weeks later, he handed it back to me. It had been repaired by his mother, who never said a word about it. She had sewn the lace down the rip and washed it and ironed it, then given it to him to hand back. That lace covered the reality of his actions and is a good analogy of the way our society talks about male violence against women. We cover it up. We hide beneath the veneer of excuses and justifications without looking at it for what it is. Some men think they own women and their bodies and that they have the right to do whatever they want to control them. And they will do whatever it takes to get revenge if crossed, because that women and children are their possessions, and that terrified women are coerced into pretending that everything is okay because they are literally scared of being unalived. We smile and we hold their hands and we have sex with men we fear will take our lives. We are accountable for their behavior and our own. The media won't educate themselves, but just keep promulgating the same BS about nice guys. Men who unalive their partners and or kids are never nice guys, ever. So this woman is in New Zealand. I found that out as I scrolled the comments. Obviously, she's in the church because she kept on talking about the church elders visiting her. The wild thing is so many people talk about feminism and divorce, and the feminists are the ones that are breaking up the families and all of this. But just imagine being the children that are growing up seeing this, because she was once one of those children that grew up seeing her dad being violent, and that was her norm. That was her norm. Plus, like she said, church elders are not to be you can't go against what they say. They are the church elders. You're supposed to look up to these men. So she had no baseline to know and understand that she could actually assert some of her own rights and have an opinion and try to keep herself and her children safe. She had to live on eggshells, constantly walk on eggshells, and try to manage his behavior. She had to manage herself and his behavior just to stay safe. And then people wonder why the birth rates are dropping, why the marriage rates are dropping, why women are becoming increasingly feminist, why women don't want to remarry. Think about the PTSD that this woman has simply by a truck driving by that she doesn't know, or it makes a sound or something breaks. Think about the PTSD that those children will have going into their relationships and thinking that this type of thing is normal. This is the reason why sharing women's perspective is so important, and is also why deprogramming from the church is so important, because the church has socialized women to take all of this mess like it's normal. Join the conversation. Let me know what you think about this. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.